At 5:17 local time, the sea around the U.S. carrier appears calm and empty. Then the radar picture changes. First one surface contact appears, then 4, then 9, then so many that no one can dismiss them as ordinary traffic. On the flag bridge, the silence lasts only a second, but everyone feels it. The symbols are moving quickly, low over the water, spreading outward before curving back in. This is not merchant movement. It is not fishing boats. It is not random. Inside the operations center, the report comes in sharp and controlled. Multiple high-speed surface contacts bearing 085 through 113. Range decreasing. Another voice follows almost immediately. Additional contacts appearing to port. The carrier holds her course. That is the first important detail. No sudden turn, no visible confusion. Just a massive wall of American steel continuing through the Gulf as 20 Iranian fast boats begin forming what looks like a moving ring. On the flight deck, yellow shirts pause mid-task and look beyond the bow. From that height, the approaching boats first appear as thin white streaks across the blue water. Small, almost unreal. But the wakes behind them tell a different story. They are moving with speed, with timing, and with enough coordination to be taken seriously. Condition 3, set and man key stations. The order moves through the ship without chaos, because it does not need chaos. Sailors turn, move fast, secure headsets, seal hatches, check screens, confirm circuits. On a U.S. aircraft carrier, escalation does not begin with loud voices. It begins with systems coming online. The first bridge-to-bridge message goes out in English. Iranian fastcraft approaching U.S. naval formation. This is a United States Navy vessel operating in international waters. Alter course immediately and maintain safe separation. No answer. A second message is sent, still nothing. On radar, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The boats are not simply rushing straight in. That would be easier to understand, easier to predict, easier to counter. Instead, their movement is more deliberate. 4 boats angle toward the starboard side of the formation. 6 more spread ahead of the carrier's projected path. Others widen out to port, curving inward as if drawing a box across the surface of the sea. The tactical action officer studies the display for less than 2 seconds before saying what everyone in the room already knows. They are building an enclosure. That changes the mood on every deck. A swarm scenario does not need immediate contact to become serious. It only needs to shrink the space, pressure the formation, and force one wrong decision. Ahead of the carrier, an escort destroyer adjusts position by just a few degrees. The movement is subtle, precise, and intentional. Another escort holds station behind, tightening the shape of the formation. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless, just controlled movement with a clear message. The carrier group has seen this kind of pattern before. The carrier still does not turn. From the island, lookouts now confirm what the radar already showed. Low hulls, narrow profiles, hard wakes. Some boats are painted in muted coastal colors. Others look like dark shapes skipping across the chop. At this distance, they do not look powerful, but their positioning makes them impossible to ignore. They seem small, almost expendable. And that is exactly what makes them so difficult to read. Small craft, when moving in numbers, can push a massive naval formation into choices where every second matters. Let them come too close and the situation can shift faster than anyone wants. Respond too early and the other side can claim you overreacted. Wait too long and you may lose control of the moment. Inside the Combat Information Center, the range markers keep shrinking. Closest point of approach is decreasing. Multiple contacts increasing speed. One group crossing toward the bow. On the bridge, the captain does not raise his voice. He stands near the chart table, one hand on the edge, eyes moving between the forward windows and the tactical display. Maintain course. Maintain discipline. Record everything. That last order matters as much as anything else happening aboard the ship. Because this is no longer only about navigation. It is a test of pressure, timing, and control. A chance for Iranian fastcraft to make a U.S. aircraft carrier appear slowed, surrounded, even contained. And for the men and women aboard that carrier, containment is not acceptable. The first boats are now close enough for lookouts to make out individual crew silhouettes. Spray breaks over their bows. Engines cut sharply across the water. One cluster swings wider to starboard, then curves back inward, trying to close off that side. Another group ahead begins spacing itself unevenly. Not close enough to create an obvious collision risk, but close enough to make the carrier's forward path feel narrower than it was moments before. No message comes from them, no explanation, just movement, speed, and intention. Below deck, in ready rooms and passageways, sailors feel the tension even without seeing the full picture. They hear it in the shorter voices over the circuits. They sense it in the rhythm of footsteps above them. A normal morning has suddenly become something measured in bearings, distance, speed, and seconds. Out on the water, the ring is almost complete. Not close enough for a direct confrontation. Not yet, but close enough to send a message. And as the U.S. carrier continues forward into tightening space, one thing becomes clear. This is not random harassment. Iran has just tried to draw a box around an American aircraft carrier. At 5:19 local time, the water around the carrier no longer feels open. It feels measured, watched, pressured. On the tactical display, the 20 fast craft no longer look like scattered contacts. They begin to move like one coordinated system. They are not simply closing in anymore, they are dividing tasks. 4 remain ahead of the formation, crossing wide enough to avoid an obvious navigation incident, but close enough to narrow the carrier's clearest route forward. 6 more hold to starboard in a loose arc, adjusting their speed almost together. Another cluster stays to port, farther out and more patient, keeping the shape of the box instead of rushing to complete it. Inside the Combat Information Center, one operator zooms in on the surface plot and lets out a slow breath. They are not moving blindly. No one answers. No one has to. The pattern says enough. The first real tension does not come from noise. It comes from silence. The bridge-to-bridge channel opens again. Iranian fast craft. This is a United States Navy vessel. You are approaching a naval formation in international waters. Alter course and maintain safe distance. This is a United States naval formation. Your maneuvers are unsafe. Alter course immediately. Maintain separation. Only static comes back. Then silence. And that silence feels heavier than any spoken warning. Professional crews communicate. Even opposing ships usually communicate. They issue challenges, warnings, accusations, demands. But silence carries a different message. It suggests the other side wants room to move without leaving a clear record. It means they are forcing the U.S. Navy to manage the situation in real time while giving it nothing verbal to respond to. On the flight deck, catapult activity is paused. That kind of detail rarely becomes the focus afterward, but in the moment, it matters. A carrier depends on rhythm: launch, recover, prepare, refuel, repeat. Break that rhythm even for a short time, and you have done more than distract the largest ship in the group. You have forced the entire machine to shift attention. And that seems to be exactly what the fast craft want. To port, one boat increases speed, cuts inward, then pulls away just before crossing a clear boundary. From starboard, another mirrors the same move. Seen from above, it would almost look calculated. 2 points tightening, then easing back, testing the edges of the carrier group's response. Closest point of approach forward is still decreasing. Starboard arc tightening. Port group holding outside, waiting. The reports arrive quickly, clipped and controlled. On the bridge, the captain watches through binoculars as one of the lead Iranian boats hammers across the chop. Its bow rises sharply, spray breaking around it. Through the lenses, he can make out figures on deck. These are not random civilians. They are braced for speed, facing forward, moving with purpose. Farther out, one of the escorts begins a controlled move to cover the carrier's exposed side. Not enough to look alarmed. Not enough to hand anyone a dramatic image. Just enough to show that the formation is now bringing its own weight into the problem. Still, the carrier holds course. That discipline is intentional. A less experienced force might turn too early and reveal discomfort. A less controlled command center might flood the radios and give away tension. But here, every decision follows the same rule. Do not give the small boats the picture they came to create. Inside electronic warfare, another report breaks through. Surface search emissions detected. Narrow band, intermittent. The atmosphere shifts again. It is not a targeting lock. Not at this stage. But it is enough to show that some of the boats are doing more than racing close and creating pressure. They are scanning, measuring, and building a clearer picture of the formation's speed, heading, and spacing. They are painting the screen, the electronic warfare officer says. No one wastes words, because now the fast craft are doing 2 things at once. They are tightening the water around the carrier, and they are studying how the carrier group responds. They are doing 2 things at once, tightening the space on the water and gathering information inside it. Every second they stay this close, they learn something. Reaction time, escort positioning, bridge discipline, radio rhythm, how the formation breathes under pressure. But the learning goes both ways. High on the carrier's island, optics teams are recording every wake, every shift in formation, every angle of approach. The American side is studying the pattern just as carefully. Every move is being logged, every line across the water is becoming part of the picture. Then one Iranian boat makes the boldest move so far. It breaks away from the starboard group and drives inward, aiming for the narrow space between the outer escort and the carrier itself. Not a collision course, not an open move across a red line. Something more complicated and in some ways more dangerous. It is a maneuver built around a question no naval commander wants to answer at close range. How much space will you give up before you respond? Inside the Combat Information Center, several heads turn toward the same display. Fast mover entering inner lane, range decreasing. For a moment, the entire encounter seems to shrink around that one boat. Through the forward windows, it is no longer just a radar contact. It is visible now as a hard, skipping hull, throwing two white trails behind it as it cuts across the blue water toward one of the most protected ships on the planet. No dramatic response follows. No sudden movement from the carrier, no raised voices, no visible panic. The destroyer to starboard adjusts by a fraction. The carrier does not, and that, by itself, is an answer. The Iranian boat keeps coming, then turns away just enough to remain short of the invisible boundary that would force the situation into a different category. Another boat behind it repeats the same curve, underlining the message. Not retreat, not direct confrontation, pressure. Ahead of the carrier, the boats across the forward path begin changing their spacing. They are not fully closing the bow, they are shaping it, making the safest water appear tighter than it truly is. That is when the tactical action officer says it quietly, almost like a diagnosis. They are shaping the operating space, and for the first time that morning, no one aboard can treat this simple harassment. The box is no longer just forming, it is working. At 5:21 local time, the U.S. Navy stops merely absorbing pressure. It begins taking the water back. On the carrier's bridge, the order is brief. Go active. No alarm follows, no sharp change in course, no loud command over the open circuit, just a shift in posture. Quiet, controlled, clear. Across the formation, systems that had been observing now begin influencing the scene. On the starboard escort, the helicopter detachment is already in motion. Rotor blades start turning, slowly at first, then faster, cutting the morning air into hard mechanical pulses. Deck crew crouch low, signaling through rotor wash and engine noise. Less than a minute later, the first MH-60 Seahawk rises from the deck and moves out over the water. A second helicopter follows from farther back in the screen. Now the geometry changes. Until this moment, the Iranian fast boats had controlled the visual rhythm of the encounter. They moved first. They shaped the pressure. They forced the formation to read, measure, and respond. That changes the moment the helicopters clear the ships and drop low over the Gulf. From the Combat Information Center, the live feed spreads across several screens at once. Infrared, zoomed optics, surface track overlays, the boats that had been little more than fast-moving marks on radar suddenly become real and human. Engine heat glows through the sensors. Hull numbers begin to come into focus. Crew silhouettes sharpen. Mounted equipment becomes easier to tell apart from railings and spray guards. The entire group, dangerous partly because it was unclear, begins to lose the cover that distance had given it. One aviation officer says it simply. We have eyes on all outer clusters. That matters, because in modern naval standoffs, the side that sees clearly first often controls what happens next. The lead Seahawk comes in from outside the starboard arc, low enough to be impossible to ignore, but high enough to avoid looking reckless. It does not dive toward the boats. It does not fake an aggressive pass. It simply appears with the calm pressure of a combat-ready machine flown by people who know exactly how close is close enough. Below, the fast boats react immediately. Two hold their speed, one drifts outward, another throws spray as its pilot corrects course a little too sharply. Small movements maybe, but they say a lot. Pressure works best when the other side only has to watch you. Now the Iranian crews have to watch the sky as well. Another message goes out over the bridge-to-bridge channel. Iranian fast craft operating near United States naval formation. Your maneuvers are unsafe. Maintain separation. You are being recorded. Still no reply. But now their silence is starting to cost them. The second Seahawk swings wide to port and begins a matching orbit, turning the carrier group's problem into something three-dimensional. The boats are no longer shaping the scene only around steel hulls and wake lines. They are now under overlapping observation from above, tracked from several angles, with every movement logged in real time. Inside electronic warfare, the reports continue. Narrowband surface search still active, multiple transmitters, intermittent coordination traffic likely. The Iranians are still probing, still trying to gather whatever information they can. But every second they remain close, the U.S. Navy is gathering more. Voice patterns, formation behavior, reaction timing. Which boats hold steady under pressure, and which ones slip out of alignment first? Ahead of the carrier, the four boats blocking the cleanest water keep their staggered spacing. They are trying to make the forward path look crowded without crossing into a clear hostile move. It is clever, it is risky, and it points directly at the one thing even a supercarrier cannot ignore: navigational pressure. The response does not come from the carrier itself. It comes from the screen. To starboard, the guided missile destroyer eases outward just enough to strengthen the formation's flank. Not a charge, not a provocation. Just steel moving into the seam the fast boats have been pressing for several minutes. At the same time, the first Seahawk drops lower and sweeps across the outside edge of the nearest Iranian cluster. Rotor wash flattens the water beneath it. Spray rips sideways across the surface. The message is immediate. We see you. We are above you. And we are not leaving. For the first time that morning, the fast boat formation begins to lose its clean shape. One cluster on the starboard side begins to spread wider than intended as two boats leave more space between themselves than before. On the port side, another group hesitates, caught between keeping the box intact and staying clear of the helicopter's orbit. The shift is small. From a distance, most people would miss it, but the Combat Information Center does not. Starboard arc loosening. Port group no longer matched. Forward block still holding. The tactical action officer gives a single nod. That is the opening. The carrier itself still does not break its rhythm. Her bow keeps pushing forward, steady and unstoppable, throwing white water out to both sides. That calm movement has become its own kind of pressure. The helicopters are pressing from above. The escorts are correcting the shape of the formation, and the carrier, by refusing to flinch, is forcing the fast boats to be the ones making constant adjustments. That is how a swarm begins to lose control of the moment. Not all at once, not in some dramatic turn, just one correction after another, until coordination starts turning into strain. On the flight deck, crews remain clear of launch positions, watching the horizon through heat, shimmer, and salt haze. They can now see one of the helicopters pacing a cluster of boats almost side on, close enough for every Iranian crewman below to read the American markings on its fuselage. No direct engagement, no sudden release of force, just presence, sensors, timing, and control. Inside the carrier, another report comes in. Forward contact still screening the path, but a lane is beginning to open between clusters. No one celebrates. It is too early for that. The box is still there, but it is no longer closing smoothly. For the first time since the 20 boats appeared on radar, the US Navy is no longer simply sitting inside the geometry. It is cutting into it. At 5:23 local time, the encounter reaches the point where one poor decision could turn seamanship into something far more serious. The box around the carrier is no longer clean, but it is still dangerous. Ahead of the formation, the remaining Iranian fast boats keep working the same idea. Stay just outside the line, crowd the safest water, and force the US Navy to either give up space or respond under observation. To starboard, the boats that had widened under helicopter pressure begin trying to close in again. Not with the same confidence as before, but with enough discipline to keep the pressure alive. Inside the Combat Information Center, nobody is looking at the whole sea anymore. They are looking at seconds. Forward cluster still compressing, starboard contacts adjusting inward, port side holding wider. Closest point of approach still falling on lead fast mover. On the bridge, the captain says nothing for a moment. He studies the tactical display, then looks through the forward glass at the narrow white wakes crossing ahead of the carrier. He has no interest in theatrics, no interest in giving the fast boats the image they came to create. But he also understands the reality of close quarters naval pressure. At this distance, control is not measured by size. It is measured by timing, discipline, and the ability to make the other side move first. At some point, pressure turns into a choice, and that moment has arrived. The boldest Iranian move of the morning comes from ahead and starboard. Three fast boats break slightly from their staggered formation and push inward together. They are not driving straight at the carrier. Instead, they angle toward the narrow space between the outer escort and the forward edge of the formation. It is the most difficult kind of move to manage in a close naval encounter. Not an obvious crossing, not a simple mistake. A calculated attempt to create a decision point. One boat cuts in first, the second follows on a tighter line. The third trails just half a beat behind, enough to complicate timing for anyone trying to read the move. From the carrier's island, they are no longer just part of a swarm. They are individual hulls now, slamming through the chop, bows high, engines screaming, spray tearing off them in sheets. Crew members crouch low against the speed. Mounted gear is visible, not directed at anyone, but impossible to ignore. On one of the escorts, a watchstander speaks into the circuit without changing tone. Lead group is making a final push. The words land across the formation like steel, because everyone understands what they mean. This is the breakpoint. Above the water, the first Seahawk banks sharply and drops slightly, sliding across the outer edge of the three-boat push. Its rotor wash cuts into the sea, flattening the surface below and throwing spray sideways across the lead Iranian hull. The helicopter does not need to pretend it is making a direct run. Its purpose is different. It is there to take attention, disrupt timing, and force the fast boats to manage more than one problem at the same time. Almost at that same moment, the second Seahawk tightens from port, adding another layer of pressure across the front of the moving box. Now the water is becoming crowded for the Iranians. Too crowded. Inside the Combat Information Center, the reports come faster. Lead helicopter pressing starboard push. Destroyer adjusting by degrees. Forward lane beginning to widen. That destroyer movement is small enough that a civilian observer might never notice it. But at sea, a few degrees of steel at the right second can change everything. The escort does not rush forward. It does not challenge the boats head-on. It simply angles its bow into the seam they were trying to use, strengthening the gap and forcing the lead Iranian craft to decide. Keep coming and run out of safe water, or turn first. That is the kind of choice a professional naval formation is built to create. The first boat holds its line a fraction too long, then snaps outward. Not a retreat, not an admission, just a hard correction from a crew that has run out of room. The second boat reacts half a second later, and that delay matters. Its wake crosses the first boat's line. Spray erupts behind both hulls. The pilot has to pull wider than planned, weakening the tight geometry that made the push so dangerous. The third boat suddenly has no clean lane at all. It shears away harder than the others to avoid stacking into the same space. From above, the result is immediate. The three-boat pressure move does not end with spectacle. It ends with spacing. And spacing is everything. Starboard push broken. Forward contact separation increasing. Opening lane confirmed. No one aboard the carrier celebrates. They are still watching the next 10 seconds because swarms do not lose control all at once. They lose it one correction at a time. And sometimes, given even a small chance, they can regain shape. But the U.S. Navy does not give them that chance. The helicopters keep steady pressure. Not reckless, not theatrical, just constant. One passes low off the lead boat's flank, close enough for every crewman aboard to see the American markings and the hard outline of control overhead. The other holds a wider orbit, forcing the remaining boats ahead of the carrier to split their attention between the sea in front of them and the aircraft above. Behind all of it, the carrier keeps moving. That is the real setback for the Iranian boats. They had tried to make the giant turn, slow down, or show even a hint of uncertainty. Instead, the giant stays on schedule. Its bow enters the widening corridor as if that path had been there the entire time. Ahead of the ship, the last boat still trying to screen the route now faced the same choice as the starboard group. Hold position and risk being overtaken by the formation's geometry, or move wider and protect their own space. One by one, they move wider. The clean edges of the box begin to fall apart. What had looked coordinated on radar only minutes earlier now breaks into scattered contacts and uneven arcs. The ring is no longer a ring. It is a group of fast hulls trying not to be the one that stays too close for too long. On the bridge, the captain lowers his binoculars. No smile, no speech, just one quiet order. Maintain course. And with that, the carrier moves through the gap. Iran had tried to box in an American aircraft carrier, but at the most important moment, they ran out of room inside the shape they created. By 5:25 local time, the sea around the carrier is opening again. Not because the fast boats have disappeared, not because anyone used force, but because the decisive moment has already passed. On the carrier's tactical display, the pattern that had looked so dangerous minutes earlier is now dissolving into scattered movement. The boats are still there, still fast, still close enough to be watched carefully. But they are no longer working as a box. The forward screen has broken into uneven spacing. The starboard arc has widened. The portside boats, once patient and controlled, are now reacting instead of setting the rhythm. The carrier strike group has taken the water back. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tone shifts only slightly. There is no celebration, no sudden release of tension, just a change from immediate pressure to controlled follow-through. Forward lane holding, starboard contacts widening, carrier clear on present course. 3 simple updates. 3 facts that say more than any dramatic headline could. On the flight deck, crews begin preparing to return to normal rhythm. Not fully routine yet, not completely. But the pause is ending. The massive machine that had absorbed the pressure, measured the risk, and moved through it is starting to breathe in its usual tempo again. That is the quiet proof of who controlled the encounter. Because despite all the speed, noise, and movement from the Iranian boats, they failed at the one thing they came to do. They did not stop the carrier. They did not force a dramatic course change. They did not create panic. They did not get the image of a U.S. warship trapped inside a tightening ring of small craft. Instead, they gave the Navy something else. A complete picture. High above the water, the Seahawks remain in orbit. Still watching, still recording. Every correction the fast boats made, every failed attempt to close the corridor again, every moment when one cluster drifted out of sync with another. The boats are no longer just pressure points on the water. They are data now. Patterns, timelines, behavior. A clear record of how the formation was built, how it was tested, and how it came apart. They are data now, and data matters. Inside the strike group, the real aftermath is already taking shape. Surface tracks are being saved. Signals are being sorted. Any captured radio traffic is being reviewed. Timing gaps between maneuvers are being compared. Which boats stayed in formation the longest? Which ones widened first under helicopter pressure? Which groups seemed to coordinate by radio, and which ones appeared to rely on visual cues? That is the part most people never see in moments like this. They see the fast boats, they see the wakes, they feel the tension, but they do not see how much a disciplined naval formation can learn when the other side gets too close. Iran had come in with numbers, speed, and pressure. But at close range, numbers reveal habits, and habits become patterns. Modern naval forces know how to use patterns. One of the helicopters makes a final pass along the outer edge of the scattered boats. Not low enough to look provocative, not high enough to seem disengaged, just close enough to remind everyone below that the carrier group is still watching from above, still holding the vertical space, and still in no rush to leave. The message is clear. This part is over. Do not try to start it again. Ahead, the carrier continues through the Gulf as if the morning had never changed. Its bow cuts forward with steady authority. Its wake rolls out behind it in long white lines. From a distance, the scene almost looks calm again. But calm does not mean forgotten. Every officer on the bridge understands what those last 8 minutes meant. This was not random harassment. It was a calculated attempt to create tactical pressure around one of the most powerful formations at sea, to crowd it, to slow it, to create hesitation without crossing into a larger confrontation. A gray zone move built on closeness, uncertainty, and cameras. And it failed. Not because the boats were harmless, not because the carrier was untouchable. It failed because the side that stayed calm kept control of the moment. That is what outsiders often miss about naval power. It is not always about who moves fastest. Sometimes it belongs to the side that refuses to be rushed. The Iranian boats continue moving outward in loose groups, keeping just enough posture to avoid looking like they are backing down, but no longer pressing hard enough to shape the situation. They still occupy the water. They still signal defiance. But defiance is not control. Control is the carrier returning to its mission while the boats fall behind. Control is the escort sliding back into proper spacing without ever losing discipline. Control is flight deck activity coming back to life while the fast craft that tried to shape the encounter are left reacting to an outcome they no longer command. On the bridge, the captain watches the nearest cluster widen by another few hundred yards. Then he turns back toward the forward windows. No speech, no dramatic declaration, just the carrier moving on. Behind it, the Gulf is still marked by white wakes and unanswered intent. Ahead of it, the water is open. Iran had tried to box in a U.S. aircraft carrier with 20 fast boats. What happened instead was quieter, simpler, and far more revealing. The boats came close, the Navy stayed steady, and in the end, the carrier kept moving.